These days, my Notes app has more love songs in it than grocery lists, and my wife likes to say she outcompeted a spreadsheet for my attention and won. She says it like a joke. I let her, because the truth underneath it is heavier than a joke, and some Tuesdays a man just wants to hand his wife the funny version instead of the whole one. It didn't start that way. For 31 years, that app and the beat-up notebook before it and the backs of feed receipts before that held exactly one secret, kept from every single person in Copper Creek, Montana, including, for a long time, myself. I was not a man who wrote songs. I was a man who ran cattle, mended fence, and hauled hay. And if you'd told anyone in this town that Colt Bennett spent his nights turning the ordinary parts of other people's lives into verses he'd never let a soul hear, they'd have laughed you off the ranch. I'm going to tell you about the night I opened that app in front of a woman who'd just told me, quiet and certain, that she wasn't the kind anybody wrote songs about. But first, you should understand exactly how long a man can carry a thing before he finally sets it down where somebody else can see it. My name is Colt Bennett. I'm 34, and I've run the day-to-day of the Bennett family cattle operation outside Copper Creek since my father's hip finally gave out for good 6 years back. It's 4 generations of Bennett land, 1,100 head some seasons, and the kind of work that puts a permanent ache in your lower back by 40 and teaches you, early, that a man's worth around here gets measured in fence line mended and cattle moved. Not in anything softer than that. My father, Hank Bennett, is not a cruel man. I want that clear before I tell you the wound, because he'd hate being cast as a villain in his own son's story, and he doesn't deserve it. He's just a product of a harder, quieter generation, raised by a father who was harder and quieter still, and somewhere in that chain, the Bennett men learned that certain things simply weren't said out loud, and certain other things weren't done at all if you wanted to be taken seriously as a man who could run a ranch. I was 11 when he found the notebook. My mother had died the winter before, pneumonia, fast and merciless, and I'd taken to writing down things about her in the evenings, verses mostly, clumsy rhymes about her hands and her laugh and the smell of the bread she used to make, because it was the only way an 11-year-old boy in a house gone suddenly silent knew how to keep her present. My father found it in my school bag, read maybe 4 lines, and set it back exactly where he'd found it without a word. He never brought it up again. Not once in 23 years. But that Sunday at dinner, apropos of nothing. Staring at his plate instead of me, he said, "Cowboys don't write poetry, son. World doesn't have much use for a rancher who cries into a notebook instead of getting up in the morning and doing the work in front of him." That was the whole conversation. It was also, as far as my father knew, the end of the subject forever. It wasn't the end of the subject. It just went underground. The way most things do in a house that doesn't talk. I kept writing, later, private, careful, in a spiral notebook I hid in the tack room's back wall behind a loose board, and later still, once phones got smart enough, in an app nobody would ever think to open because nobody around here imagines Colt Bennett has anything to say worth typing out. Songs about cattle drives and dead mothers and the particular gold the light goes at 7 in the evening in August. Songs, eventually, about a woman 2 aisles over at the feed store, who I'd been quietly failing to stop noticing for the better part of a year. Her name is Josie Calder, and here's what this town thought it knew about her before I ever wrote a single line down: that she ran the books and the counter at Calder Feed and Supply, the family business her father built and her older sister was supposed to inherit before deciding the family business wasn't the life she wanted and moving to Bozeman for a marketing job instead, leaving Josie, the practical one, the reliable one, to keep the family store running while everyone in Copper Creek quietly agreed she was the sensible sister and her sister Bree was the pretty one, which is a distinction this town has never once had the decency to stop drawing out loud. I'd known Josie my whole life, the way you know everybody in a town of 800 people, but I really started noticing her 3 years ago at the co-op's spring supply sale, watching her talk a rancher twice her age out of overbuying fertilizer he didn't need, gentle and firm and completely unimpressed by his blustering. And something in the specific competence of it hit me sideways in a way I didn't have words for out loud, though I had plenty of them, apparently, in a notebook nobody ever saw. I started finding reasons to be at the feed store. A man running 1,100 head of cattle has legitimate, frequent business at a feed store, which made the whole thing easy to disguise, including from myself for longer than I'd like to admit. She'd ring me up, we'd talk weather and cattle prices and the co-op gossip, and I'd drive back to the ranch turning some new detail over, the way she double-checked every order twice out of an old habit she called measuring twice, the reading glasses she wore low on her nose and always seemed embarrassed about, the specific dry humor she deployed on difficult customers that most people missed because they weren't listening closely enough to catch it. I was listening closely. I'd been listening closely for 3 years, mostly in silence, occasionally in verse, never once out loud. I met her father properly that first winter, Russ Calder. A broad, quiet man who'd run the store's yard operations for 30 years and had gone since his wife's death, a little grayer around the edges than a man his age should be. He was out back loading my truck one January morning, and he paused, wiping his hands on his coveralls, and looked at me with the specific directness of a man who doesn't waste words he doesn't need. "You're out here a lot, Bennett. Ranch needs a lot of feed, Russ." He hefted another bag into the bed. "Josie says you fixed the dock gate again last week. It jams in the cold. Always has. 11 times in 3 years, by my count." He wasn't looking at me now, focused hard on the bag in his hands. I should be the one fixing it. "I built that dock with my own hands, back when Marion was still." He stopped, cleared his throat, started the sentence somewhere else entirely. "I let a lot of things slide since we lost her." The girls picked up what I dropped. Bree picked it up, and then set it back down, and left. Josie just kept carrying it. Never asked me to carry my share back. She's good at carrying things quiet. I've noticed. "Yeah." He finally looked at me, something raw and tired in it. Somebody ought to notice that out loud sometime, before she decides quiet's all she's ever going to get credited for. He shut the tailgate, harder than it needed. "That's all I've got to say about it. Drive safe." I thought about that conversation more than he probably intended me to, all the way home, and for months after. The friendship, such as it was, deepened slow. The way things do in a small town where everybody already half knows everybody's business and there's no real hurry to any of it. She started saving me the good hay bales before the Saturday rush. I started fixing the feed store's ancient loading dock gate every time it jammed, which was often, because I'd built the thing myself for her father 15 years back and knew its moods better than anyone. We fell into an easy rhythm. Coffee some mornings before the store opened, if I was in town early enough. Her telling me about the store's books or her sister's latest call from Bozeman. Me mostly listening. The way I've always been better at listening than talking, which suited a man with a secret notebook just fine. "You're a good listener, Bennett," she told me once, over coffee on a cold March morning, the store still dark behind its closed sign. "Most men around here can't wait for their turn to talk. You actually seem to hear what I said 5 minutes ago. Ranch work teaches you to notice things. Cattle can't tell you what's wrong. You learn to read the smaller signs. Is that what I am? A signal reading exercise?" But she was smiling when she said it, dry, testing. "You're considerably more interesting than a heifer with a limp, though I'll admit the skill set overlaps some." That got a real laugh out of her. Surprised, warm, and I carried that laugh home with me and wrote 4 lines about it before I even got my boots off, which had become, by then, an entirely ordinary Tuesday for me and an entirely secret one for everyone else on Earth. There was a Tuesday, in September, about a year and a half in, when I came by for feed and found her elbow deep in the store's ancient filing cabinet, muttering at a stack of invoices like they'd personally wronged her. "Bad afternoon?" The co-op billed us twice for the same delivery, and then had the audacity to send a late notice on the payment we never should have owed in the first place. She didn't look up. "I've been on hold with their accounting department for 40 minutes. I've started composing the strongly worded letter in my head. It's very good. You'd be proud. Read it to me." That got her attention. She sat back on her heels, considering me. "You want to hear my strongly worded letter to a feed co-op's accounting department? I want to hear anything you've been composing in your head for 40 minutes. Sounds like it's earned an audience." She laughed, surprised, and gave me 3 lines of it. Sharp, funny, absolutely devastating in a way that made me grin the whole drive home, and I wrote half of them down almost verbatim that night, dressed up in different clothes. Because there was something in the exact rhythm of her fury that felt like it belonged in a song whether she ever knew it or not. Another evening, closing time, she caught me fixing the loading dock gate again and leaned in the doorway watching. You know my dad would pay you for this. Actual money. You've fixed that gate 11 times in 3 years for free. I like fixing things that stay fixed for a while and then break again. Gives a man something to look forward to. That's either the most patient thing anyone said to me or a very elaborate excuse to keep showing up here. She crossed her arms, but she was smiling doing it. Which is it, Bennett? Ask me again sometime when I've got the nerve to answer honestly. I'm going to hold you to that. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. I learned the rest of Josie Calder's story slowly, in the pieces she was willing to hand out, same as I've learned every careful person's story in my life, including my own father's. Her mother died when Josie was 19, which left her and Bree, 3 years apart, running the family business's front counter while their father managed the yard and the deliveries. Grief-stricken and increasingly checked out in the particular way of a man who'd built a life entirely around a woman and didn't know how to keep building without her. Bree, older, prettier by this town's exhausting old math, and considerably less interested in fertilizer margins, left for Bozeman the day she turned 23 and never seriously looked back, which everyone in Copper Creek agreed was a shame. In the specific tone people use when they mean the opposite about the sister who stayed. She was homecoming queen, Josie told me once. Flat, no bitterness performed, just fact. The kind of fact you've said so many times it's worn smooth. I was homecoming queen's little sister who ran the concession stand because somebody had to, and nobody was going to ask Bree. That's sort of the whole shape of us, if you want the short version. She got looked at. I got handed the clipboard. Clipboards keep the lights on. Looking at somebody doesn't. Try telling this town that. Try telling my own father that some days. She said it light, but something moved under it, old and worn down smooth from handling. It's fine, Colt. I made my peace with the shape of it a long time ago. Bree's not cruel about it. For the record, she just is what she is. And I am what I am. And this town decided a long time ago which one of us was the interesting sister. I wanted badly to argue with every word of that. I didn't, because arguing would have meant explaining exactly how many verses I'd already spent proving her wrong, silently, in a notebook she'd never seen, and I wasn't ready for that particular door yet. So I let the silence sit there, same as always, doing none of the work it needed to do. There was a night in May, a few weeks before all this, when I nearly told her. We were sitting on the tailgate of my truck behind the store after closing, splitting a six-pack neither of us really needed, and she was telling me some story about a customer who'd tried to return a bag of feed 3/4 empty. And I was laughing in the right places. And underneath all of it, I had my phone in my jacket pocket, the Josie folder sitting there like a held breath. I got as far as pulling it halfway out. "What's that?" she asked, nodding at my hand. "Nothing. Habit. Thought I had a text." I put it back, heart going harder than the moment warranted, and the window closed. Quiet, the way windows do when you're not quite ready to climb through them yet. "You've been doing that a lot lately," she said, studying me over her beer. "Reaching for your phone and then not looking at it. You planning on telling me what that's about? Or am I supposed to guess?" "Working up to it," I admitted, which was as honest as I'd managed to be about it out loud. To anyone. In 3 years. "Take your time, Bennett. I'm not going anywhere." She bumped her shoulder against mine. Easy, unhurried. And we sat there till the stars came out proper, and I drove home that night furious at my own nerve, or lack of it, and wrote 2 more entries before I finally slept. June brought the trouble, in the shape of Bree's 10th wedding anniversary, which her husband Tucker Whitmore, the town's old rodeo champion, golden and easy and genuinely well-liked, if a little oblivious, decided to throw as a full-town party at the Silver Spur, Copper Creek's one honky-tonk. The kind of event where the whole county shows up whether they're invited or not because there's nothing else happening on a Saturday in June. By June, Copper Creek had noticed. The way small towns notice everything eventually. My sister Dale cornered me at the co-op the week before the party, grinning like she'd won a bet with herself. "So," she said, "you and Josie Calder. We're friends, Dale, Colt. You fixed that dock gate 11 times. Nobody drives out for feed that often." Even Dad's noticed, and Dad notices approximately nothing that isn't cattle prices. She leaned against my truck, delighted with herself. "Are you going to do something about it? Or are you planning to just quietly adore her from a respectful fence line distance until one of you dies of old age?" "I'm working on it. You've been working on it for 3 years. At this rate, you'll propose the year Bree's kids graduate high school." She softened, though, seeing something in my face. "I like her, Colt, genuinely. She's steady in a way this family could use more of. Don't let whatever Dad taught you about keeping quiet cost you the one good thing you've quietly built." I didn't have an answer for that either, which was becoming something of a pattern by June. Josie asked me to come as, in her words, moral support against my own extended family, which I understood correctly. To be the closest thing to a date either of us had ever proposed to the other in 3 years of careful proximity. The party was, by every visible measure, exactly what you'd expect. String lights, a live band, Tucker giving a rambling, genuinely sweet toast about 10 years, with the most beautiful girl in 3 counties. And Bree, glowing, gracious, entirely unaware, I think, of the specific weight her whole existence puts on the sister standing at the edge of the dance floor with a beer she wasn't really drinking. Then, Tucker did the thing that broke the evening open. 3 drinks in, sentimental, he grabbed the mic from the band's singer and announced, to the whole crowded bar, that he'd hired a songwriter down in Bozeman to write Bree an actual song for the occasion. A real one, professional, strings and everything, and he played it off his phone through the bar's speakers. A genuinely lovely tune about Bree's laugh and Bree's eyes and 10 years of loving. Bree Calder Whitmore, and the whole bar applauded, and Bree cried the good kind of tears, and it was, by every measure that matters to a town like Copper Creek, a perfect romantic gesture. I watched Josie's face through the whole thing. I watched something in it go quietly, carefully still. The specific stillness of a person doing math they've done 100 times before and getting, once again, the same answer. She excused herself before the song even finished. I found her out back of the Silver Spur 10 minutes later, sitting on an overturned feed bucket someone had left by the delivery door, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at nothing in particular. "You don't have to do the thing where you follow me and say something kind," she said, before I'd gotten 2 steps closer. "I've had a lot of practice standing at the edges of nights like this. I'll be fine in a minute. I'm not following you to say something kind. I just wanted to make sure you had somebody out here who wasn't applauding." That got the smallest almost laugh out of her, brief, gone fast. It's a good song, actually. That's the stupid part. Tucker's not a bad guy, he's not trying to hurt me, he's just being Tucker. Grand and loud and completely unaware that every grand loud gesture toward my sister lands on me like a diagnosis. She wiped her eyes fast, furious at herself for the tears. "You know what I've never had, Colt? Not once, in 31 years? Anybody writing so much as a limerick about me. Not a real song, not a bad poem, not even a decent birthday card verse that wasn't store-bought. I used to think it was just because I hadn't met the right person. Now I think it's simpler than that." Her voice went flat, certain, the sound of a verdict long since decided and only now finally said out loud. "I'm not the kind of woman men write songs about. I'm the kind who keeps the books, so the men who write songs about somebody else can afford the wedding." The words hung there in the cool June dark, plain, unguarded, costing her something to say and costing me. In that exact moment, everything I'd spent 3 years, 23 years, if I'm honest about where this particular silence started, carefully not saying back. I sat down on the crate next to her feed bucket. I pulled my phone out of my jacket pocket, and I opened my notes app right in front of her. "What are you doing?" Something I should have done a year ago. Maybe longer. My hands weren't quite steady, and I let them not be, because some things shouldn't be steady when they finally happen. You should know before I do this that nobody on this earth has ever seen what's in this app. Not my father, not my sister, not one living soul in 31 years. I need you to understand what you're about to be the first person to see, because I think it changes how you hear it. She went very still. Colt, I'm not done getting up the nerve. Give me a second. I scrolled past hundreds of entries, years of them, until I found the folder I was looking for, the one labeled, plainly, embarrassingly, simply Josie. There's 41 of these. I started counting somewhere around number 12, and never stopped. Which tells you something about how far gone I already was by the time I admitted it to myself. She stared at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen like she was trying to make the two things. Steady, quiet, cattle and fence line Colt Bennett, and a folder of 41 songs occupy the same body at once. 41, she repeated. Faint. Since when? The first one's dated 14 months back. Give or take a week, I was too much of a coward to write it down honest. 14 months. Colt, that's before I even. She stopped herself, doing some private arithmetic. That's before the co-op billing fight. Before any of it. I told you. I started counting around number 12 and never stopped. I'm going to read you one. Not the best one, I don't trust myself to judge that fairly right now, just the first one, from about a year back. So, you understand this isn't a thing I cooked up tonight because Tucker embarrassed you into needing rescuing. I've been writing about you since before either of us called this a friendship out loud. I found it, throat tight in a way that had nothing to do with the June night air. It's called Measuring Twice. It's not fancy. I'm not a real songwriter. Whatever this folder wants to claim about itself, it's just true. I read it to her right there behind the silver spur, sitting on a feed store crate, the bar's muffled band still playing inside. And I'm not going to write the whole thing out for you now. Because some things a person earns by being the one it was written for and nobody else gets that particular right. I'll tell you it was about reading glasses worn low on a nose, and double-checked orders, and a laugh that came out surprised every single time like she still didn't quite believe she was allowed to have one. I'll tell you it wasn't about Brie at all. Not one line, not one comparison. Because in 3 years and 41 songs, I had never once needed her sister to make sense of what I saw in Josie Calder. She was crying by the second verse. Not the performed kind. Not even the furious kind from 10 minutes earlier. Something quieter. Something coming loose from a very old, very tight knot. You've had this the whole time, she said, when I finished. Voice thick. A whole folder. Since before I even let myself think about you that way. I've had it since a year before I let myself think about you that way, if I'm being fully honest, which apparently I'm doing tonight whether I plan to or not. I set the phone down between us, screen still glowing with 40 verses of a folder no one else on earth had ever seen. My father found a notebook of mine when I was 11, right after my mother died, and told me cowboys don't write poetry, and I believed him for 23 years, Josie. Believed it hard enough to keep every single true thing I ever felt locked in a file nobody could see. Because I decided somewhere along the way that being taken seriously as a man who could run a ranch meant never once letting anybody catch me being soft about something. I looked at her, steady now, the shaking mostly gone. Then you sat on a feed bucket tonight and told me you decided you weren't the kind of woman men write songs about. And Josie, I realized I would rather blow up 23 years of my father's rule in one night than let you keep believing that particular lie for one more hour. That's not fair, she said, half laughing through the tears now. You can't just detonate your entire emotional architecture in a bar parking lot and expect a girl to keep her composure. I wasn't aiming for your composure. I was aiming for the truth. She looked at that phone a long moment. 41 songs glowing quiet in the dark, and then she looked at me, and something in her whole face came undone in the good way. The way ice finally goes when a whole winter's been leaning on it. Read me another one, she said. I want the worst one. The clumsiest, earliest, most embarrassing one you've got. I want to see the exact moment you started being ridiculous about me. So I did. I read her 3 more behind that bar before the band even finished their set. My voice steadier each time. 23 years of Bennett silence, coming apart one verse at a time in the June dark, and when I finally set the phone down for good, she took my face in both hands, careful, deliberate, and kissed me like she'd been rehearsing the question longer than I'd been rehearsing the songs. We walked back into the Silver Spur together 20 minutes later, and if anybody noticed her eyes were red or that we came in through the back holding hands, Copper Creek had the decency, for once, not to make it the whole town's business before we'd had a chance to make it ours. I told my father 3 weeks later, drove out to the house, sat across from him at the same kitchen table where he'd delivered his one sentence about cowboys and poetry 23 years back, and told him the whole thing. The notebook, the tackroom wall, the app, the 40-some songs, and the woman I intended to keep writing them for as long as either of us was breathing. He was quiet a long while, working his jaw the way Bennett men do when something's landed too deep for easy words. "You've been carrying this since you were 11, he said finally. Not quite a question. Longer. Maybe. Since before I knew what to call it. And you never once thought to bring it back to me. After that Sunday. Would you have wanted me to?" He didn't answer that right away, which was its own kind of answer. "Your mother used to hum while she cooked," he said instead, not quite looking at me. "Made up her own words half the time, nonsense mostly, whatever rhymed with whatever she was stirring. I used to stand in that kitchen doorway and listen and never once told her how much I loved it, because I didn't have the words for loving something that soft. And I was scared, I think, of what a man becomes if he lets himself feel a thing that big out loud." "Dad, let me finish. I've been working up to this for 23 years, and I don't trust myself to start over if you interrupt." He looked up, and his eyes were wet in a way I'd never once seen in 34 years. "I found your notebook and I saw 12-year-old lines about your dead mother, and I panicked, son. Not because it was bad. Because it was exactly the thing I never let myself say to her while she was alive, and I couldn't stand watching you do it right when I'd done it so wrong. That's not what it felt like from where I was sitting. It felt like you were ashamed of me. I know that's how it landed. I've had 23 years to know that's how it landed, and I never once found the nerve to fix it, which is its own kind of the same failure, isn't it? A man too scared to say the soft thing, twice over." He reached across that table, gripped my forearm, hard, the closest thing to an embrace a man like Hank Bennett has in him. "I was wrong. Cowboys can write whatever the hell they need to write. I should have told you that the same Sunday instead of 23 years late. That's the closest my father and I have ever come to talking about it. And it was enough. Some doors only need to open once. Josie and I were married the following spring, at the feed store of all places. Her idea, not mine. Because she said if a man was going to spend 3 years falling in love with her over a loading dock and a cash register, the wedding ought to happen somewhere that told the truth about how it started. Bree cried through the whole ceremony, genuinely happy, and pulled Josie aside afterward. I wasn't supposed to hear it. I did anyway, ducking back in for my jacket, and I've never told Josie I caught the whole thing, though I suspect she knows. "I need to say something, and I'm only going to manage it once," Bree said, her own mascara already a lost cause. "I have spent 30 years being the one people looked at, and do you know what that actually got me? People who wanted to look at me, not people who wanted to sit with me while the co-op billed us twice, or fix my gate 11 times for free, or write 41 songs about the specific way I double-check things. You got looked past for years, Josie, and I am only now old enough to understand that got looked past means something entirely different from got missed. Nobody in this whole county ever missed you. We just weren't paying close enough attention to notice how much we needed exactly what you were quietly doing the whole time. Bree, I envied your steadiness more than you ever envied my shine. If you want the honest truth, I've never once said out loud before today. Shine fades, Josie. Steady is what people build a whole life on." She hugged her sister, fierce, both of them crying properly now. "I'm glad it's finally your turn to be looked at too. It wasn't the whole fix, 30 years of unequal math doesn't balance in one wedding day hug, but it was a real start. And the two of them are still, slowly, working out how to actually believe it about each other, one honest conversation at a time. I read the wedding toast off my phone. 41 songs had become 63 by then, and I read the whole town the very first one, measuring twice, out loud in front of everybody. No more hiding it in a folder, meant for an audience of one. And my father sat in the front row with his hat in his lap and cried without once trying to hide it, which every person there agreed was the single strangest and finest thing they'd ever seen Hank Bennett do in public. The Notes app still fills faster than the grocery list does. Josie teases me about it constantly, and every single time I remind her of the exact same thing, because it's still the truest sentence I know. She's the kind of woman men write songs about. She's just the only one who ever got to find out it was true.